Daily Detroit is brought to you by the community. Support our work at patreon.com/dailydetroit.
Hello and welcome to your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. It is Monday, December 2nd, 2024. I am Staes and Fletcher Sharpe. What up, doe?
Man, this year is just rolling by really fast. Like I blinked and I thought it was going to be like May or something, and it's almost 2025. If you have any resolutions, now's the time to try to complete them.
Are you a resolutions guy?
Actually, no, except for this year. I set 2, and one of them I hit. The other one, I'd have to do some Herculean efforts to hit it. So we'll check back at the end of the month.
All right. Hercules. Oh, that's what I'm thinking about. What is that movie? Hercules.
Nutty Professor.
That's right. Well, I'm more of a goals guy, but you know what? I did not know at the beginning of this year that we would be talking about the demolition of the Renaissance Center. That'll be our first story that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about Stellantis. We're going to talk about the Belle Isle Conservatory reopening and a little bit of sports to end us out the door. But first, General Motors says it's ready to completely demolish Detroit's Renaissance Center if it cannot secure public funding for planned renovation with Dan Gilbert's bedrock. The automaker confirmed to the Detroit Free Press that it would pay for what could be the largest voluntary skyscraper demolition in history, rather than maintain the struggling downtown complex. The dramatic threat comes after lawmakers have shared a lot of skepticism about providing subsidies for GM and Bedrock's billion-dollar-plus plan to partially demolish and revamp the riverfront property. That proposal would preserve the main tower while converting others to residential use. In an article in the Free Press, which I'll link to in the show notes, local architects and preservationists are pushing back against both of the options, suggesting that the 1970s complex could be revamped instead. I know there's a lot of positioning. I know that we're in a lame duck session of the state legislature, and that's part of why they are trying to make this thing go. And, you know, this demolition, I believe, would be for the 4 smaller towers. But, yeah, this is very different than taking down 2 towers. And there's been a lot of pushback when it comes to the $250 million they'd like the state to kick in.
I'm going to call their bluff.
You want to call their bluff?
I'm going to call their bluff. If you really, really feel that raising the entire situation because you're not getting public money is the way to go, and you think that's not going to be like a terrible PR look for you, okay. All right. I don't think they want to do it. I think they're saying that, hoping that the public perception would be like, no, save whatever. I guess if we have to do public fund, because most people really do not want to give any public money towards renovating it. And I understand why. It's a bunch of money, and especially if it shows that they have it. And I'm pretty sure demoing all of those buildings costs more than the money that they have for renovation. I feel like they have it. They just really don't want to pay for it. So if you really, this is the thing you want to go to, okay. If they end up going through and demolishing it, it'll be a very sad day for Detroit, but I really don't think they want to do that. Like it feels, again, like the kid who's like, if you don't let me play this game, I'm going to take my ball and go home. All right, well, come and take your ball then, and then go home. I really don't think they want to do that. I think it's just an empty threat to try to make them get what they want.
Interesting. What I've been able to gather from this is that this project wouldn't make a lot of money as it is. There's $250 million in incentives, and it wouldn't be cash. Like, I think this is a big misunderstanding. I think rarely are these incentives cash, but it's more of like some sort of deferred payments or something like that, as opposed to like writing a $250 million check. I understand where a lot of people are coming from on this one. I just know that the psychological impact of taking down the RenCen would be huge and send a very negative message to the rest of the world. With all of the positives that have been happening with Michigan Central, everything else, we would be the city that demolished the biggest skyscraper. And I don't know how we perception-wise escape that.
Yeah, and see, that's why I think they're leaning on that to say, look, it will demolish this, and it could leave these psychological effects and these other things and these geological effects across the entire country. So maybe you want to give us some They know it's not a good look, and it's not a good look for them either if they do that. As you said, it's a very iconic building. Almost every single person who takes wedding photos in the city of Detroit does so that the building is at least 5 photos, has it in the background. I totally get that. It means a lot. It's been something. You look at the Detroit skyline and you can see Joe Louis's fist, you see Kobo, you see the Renaissance Center. So taking that down would be a very big, not good thing. And I think they realize that and they're like, we're going to threaten this, knowing full well that this could look very bad for the city. So maybe you'll just give us our public funding. So yeah, I would definitely call their bluff on that, because while it's going to look bad for the city in terms of like regression, it might look like maybe you're not growing the way we think you are. It's going to look even worse for them that you guys felt the need to do this when you didn't get what you wanted.
I think what's difficult about this whole thing is that the complex is just so outdated. You know, like I really wish it had been designed better so that it would have been able to weather these storms. I know that the pandemic was the last nail in the coffin, but it was already starting to kind of have issues before then. The thing is, and we're going to set this aside from the iconic view, because I know we've done a number of episodes on this. We've had so much feedback that demolishing the RenCen would take away the most iconic thing in the city of Detroit. I understand the love of the RenCen. I also think that the future is small. The future is in building smaller, more sustainable things. But I'm interested to see how people think about this one, because this is going to be a difficult choice. And the reality is that there is this lame duck session of the legislature. There are Democrats in charge of the legislature. Through the end of the year, there's going to be like this one last session. They're going to try to push things through. Afterward, it's going to be a much more difficult debate. I think they could still come up with some subsidies for something, but this would become a much larger debate. I don't want to see it fully demolished. I feel like that would be not great. I don't want, if it's just a hotel tower or something, it's just not going to feel the same. But I also know that people have strong feelings, so I want to hear what you think. dailydetroit@gmail.com. All right, there are changes in Stellantis land. Carlos Tavares, the CEO of the auto giant Stellantis, stepped down from his position at the company behind Jeep, Fiat, and Peugeot on Sunday. The resignation comes after a challenging year that saw Stellantis shares drop 40% and included a profit warning about potential cash burn of up to 10 billion euros. The company's board, led by Chairman John Elkann, is now searching for a permanent replacement, expected to be named by mid-2025. Now, Tavares had been expected to stay at the helm of the world's 4th largest car maker until early 2026. And this is a kind of new company formed in 2021. This was a merger of PSA Group and Fiat Chrysler. And this has a significant presence here in Metro Detroit, including a large factory in the city, as well as important facilities in Auburn Hills, Sterling Heights, Trenton, and Romulus. We have reported on a number of recent layoffs. Stellantis has had a lot of trouble selling those vehicles, Fletcher, Sharpe. I'm not surprised to see this move, but I do think that Stellantis needs to take some pretty strong action. They've got a great brand in Jeep, but the car market's changing so much now.
Yeah, they'll always have a client. Jeep will, and my father, he's going to buy a new Jeep every few years if he can, but I'm not one to wish for people to lose their jobs, but if you're losing 40% of value for 3 very successful car companies, if someone has stocks and shares and those things go down, that maybe a little bit is fine. 40% is drastic. When your cash burn is almost $11 billion, it's really hard to justify you keeping your job. It's unfortunate it worked out this way, especially here. I heard you say he was going to stay on to 2026. I don't really see how at the rate that he was moving.
In this, we talk about Jeep, and that's something a lot of people follow. But the Chrysler brand, I know there's some new things on the horizon, but right now, the Chrysler brand is withering. If you were to go to Chrysler.com right now, and I'm looking at it right now, there's the Pacifica plug-in hybrid, the Voyager, and the 300, and that's it. Now, I know there's more stuff in the pipeline, but this feels like Chrysler's just kind of been left to die on the vine. I know there's more stuff coming. The energy just doesn't seem there.
I mean, all they really need, I guess, is to get Cramblin and Duvet. I mean, they had a commercial for Chrysler Pacifica, didn't they? It was, you need a specific car, get a Chrysler Pacifica, hit that out, and maybe the shares will come back up. I'm not really sure. It really is a shame because growing up, like, you'd see Jeep everywhere. Chrysler was like the forefront of everything. And I understand there's like, it's a changing atmosphere in terms of car companies. I know a lot of cars are going more electric, more whatever. And I know a lot of the older ones kind of aren't. And you can see right here that it's kind of hurting them with the money they're losing significantly. So hopefully they have something on the horizon that'll stop this bleed, because I still like Jeeps. My family's a Jeep family. I think Chrysler does make some pretty decent cars. Fiats look interesting, but like they're still pretty solid. So yeah, you would hope that something happens to like make these brands grow instead of shrink.
Speaking of commercials, and this is maybe why part of my beyond my Detroit history buffness, that I have an affection. I still remember that Eminem commercial, and I know not Eminem isn't your like absolute favorite rapper ever, but as far as a moment for the city, that 300 commercial during the Super Bowl some years ago was like I feel like that was the commercial that was part of like this whole media comeback rise for the city, you know?
I mean, yeah, I know the commercial, and while Eminem is not one of my favorite guys, I am happy for anyone who is so proud of the city that they will do things to help uplift the city, even if it is paid through a commercial. I'll forever be an indelible moment seeing that commercial. And yeah, while I had to see it a bunch of times because every single person was like, that's Detroit. Like, you hope that they can get back to doing stuff like that, because when a staple is down, it's never really good for anyone else.
Fletcher, as I mentioned, and you know this, we've been doing the show together for a while. I am a history nerd. And with the news of its reopening later this week on December 4th, well, today I want to share some facts about one of Detroit's most spectacular gems, the Anna Scripps Whitcomb Conservatory on Belle Isle. Before I get into it, people have been very excited about this for us to talk about it. And the reaction on social media has been kind of huge.
Yeah, my partner, I was sitting in the TV room one day and I heard her scream as if something had happened. And I woke up concerned, like, are you okay? What's wrong? She's like, the conservatory is reopening. And I was like, yeah. She's like, we're going to go as soon as it and I'm like, all right. She gets excited about a few things. She got excited as if like there's a new type of clay that came out. She's a potter. So new clay for her is like very interesting. Seeing the reaction, I thought it was just like, oh, maybe a few people, everyone from different walks of life, different creed, everyone's excited for the conservatory to be back. And I don't know, it feels like there's like a new energy around it.
Yeah, I mean, this thing is 85 feet tall, if you didn't know. It's been open since 1904, designed by George Mason and Albert Kahn, and inspired by London's Kew Gardens. Many of the famous buildings in Detroit were designed by Kahn. Something I didn't know while researching this, Fletcher, the conservatory wasn't always named after Anna Scripps Whitcomb. For the first 51 years, it was just known as the Conservatory or the Horticulture Building, which sounds very fancy, like I'm going to grab some tea. Anna was the daughter of the Detroit News founder James E. Scripps, and in 1955, she donated a collection of 600 orchids. Many were rescued from Britain during World War II. And another thing I didn't know is that in the 1920s, this place was pulling in about 1.5 million visitors a year. For comparison, that is more than double what the Detroit Institute of Arts does today. I also didn't know it wasn't always metal. It actually was wood framed until the 1950s, when they did a $500,000 renovation that would have cost about $5.8 million today. So this is crazy. 1,500 glass panes replaced. This is a place I love to go to warm my bones. I'm just so glad to see this happen. And I think I'm going to leave with some words here. The brilliant Dan Austin over at historicdetroit.org says that if Belle Isle is Detroit's crown, then this conservatory is its brightest emerald. So yeah, I think this is a really, really cool thing for this to be happening.
Well, if that's the emerald, does that make like the soccer fields like the hardened crust of the feet of the I'm just trying to see where the soccer fields and the softball fields fit into that analogy, because I mean, They mean something to me too.
I don't want to ask what the fountain is.
Oh, I don't think we're rated for that show. I am glad that it is back. I'm kind of surprised that it was made of wood, just given how many green things are in there. I figured that might actually...
Well, that was back from 1904 to the 50s.
I mean, yeah, but even still, I'm glad that it's not wood now, because there's so many beautiful things in there that I think would probably grow with the wood, and then you'd have a whole different type of issue. But yeah, it's so many memories there. We actually have friends who've gotten married in the conservatory. It was a really sweet impromptu moment that they all agreed with. They gave us a little area that they cordoned off for us to just stand there and listen to them talk. I'm glad that it's back. I'm glad that people who are now coming into the city, because there are new Detroit residents almost every single week, I'm glad they'll get to experience one of the really cool areas inside Detroit. And I know Detroit as a city gets a lot of grief for being a concrete jungle, not having as much green as, say, some other areas. This is one of the greenest areas I've ever been to, period. So if you've never been to the conservatory before, if you haven't been in some time, you should definitely get down there. Was it December 4th when it opens?
Yeah, and it will be open Wednesdays through Sundays from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Maybe don't get there December 4th because there's going to be a lot of people, but like definitely make some time to go in there and experience all that's in there. And you can definitely experience it more than once. Like I recommend doing that because you'll see something new the next time you go.
Yeah, it can get so very cold in the D, and that is a place to get away from that. Thanks to Luciano Marcone in the background for helping with some facts on this. As always, feedback dailydetroit@gmail.com. Now, the Lions are beefing up their defense with former All-Pro safety Jamal Adams, signing him to the practice squad with plans to move him to the active roster. Adams has been a 3-time Pro Bowler. He was released by the Titans earlier this year. He joins a secondary that's already performing pretty well this season. The move comes as Detroit deals with several defensive injuries, potentially allowing Adams to fill multiple roles. Fletcher, Sharpe, what say you?
Jamal Adams, normally getting a player, still a talented player, albeit often banged up. Getting a safety would be like, well, we have the 2 rated best safeties in the NFL. We don't need a safety. Jamal Adams is a luxury because he's big enough, he hits well enough to be considered kind of a linebacker. I think he holds the record for NFL safeties in a season with sacks, having 9.5 a few years ago. Like he's someone you put in there to go after the quarterback and hit them. So in a way, he functions like an outside linebacker. He's big enough and strong enough to be one. Kind of like Quan Alexander. If this was 2018, 2019, you'd be like, wow, this is an amazing pickup. He's had a few down years, gotten hurt a little bit. His style of play doesn't really lend itself to being healthy all the time. But if they're getting him at least 80%, he can definitely help for sure. At least definitely in passing protection, whether he's a third down linebacker coming off the edge or applying some extra pressure on the sides, he can definitely help there. Big hitter, teammate guy. Seattle was kind of sad to lose him. They didn't want to pay him, but they were sad to lose someone of his caliber. And the Jets, when they brought him in, paid a bunch of money to have him, and he was working out really well until he got hurt. So as long as he can stay healthy, which with this Lions defense, could be a little scary. But if he's healthy enough to play like Quan, they picked up some diamonds in the rough, for sure.
Yeah, it's good to see them not resting at all with this, and they really do have needs. Honestly, as we said with the last episode, short season works really well for some of these more senior players, and if they play well, why not try to hold on to them?
I mean, Jamal's a bit different. His role in the Lions would be very short term, unlike Quan, who might have a spot to fill in for next year. If the Lions linebackers are healthy, Jamal doesn't really have much of a spot. And also the fact that he's going to be probably 30 next year really wouldn't help with someone who's kind of just a battering ram. But it'll give him a chance to show another team potentially that he can still do it. And hey, maybe the Lions do hold on to him, and I don't know what I'm talking about.
Let's end with talking about the Pistons. Fletcher, Sharpe, you've been wanting to highlight, 2 or 3 things from them for a while, and we just haven't had room with how much Lions talk there's been, how much other news there's been. So I wanted to take a few minutes and give you a chance because the Pistons are doing a bit better than last year.
Yeah, I mean, their record currently is 9-13, but that puts them at 10th in the East. They are recently hovering around 8th. One of the good things in the Eastern Conference this year is most of the teams are kind of hovering around the same spot. One thing I will say that's been a bit more nice for the Pistons than the previous years. Last year, people were kind of looking at the Pistons a little bit, not so much. And then as they got progressively worse, people were like, the Pistons are playing? Ugh. This year, there's a lot of hype going into the season, and everyone, not just in the city, not just in the state, not just in the region, the entire NBA are excited to watch the Pistons play. They think the Pistons are one of the most exciting teams in the league, and they can be. One of the big reasons for that is Cade Cunningham, who at one point this year, I think, had 4 straight triple-doubles in points, rebounds, and assists. Bona fide superstar. The Pistons need him to be healthy, which has been an issue. I know he missed a few games, and I think they lost 2 of the 3 that he was out. So he needs to be healthy for them to do well. Another thing that's great, no more Monty Williams. As someone who is very much when they first got him, like they have their guy they need. Like, they have Monty. They should be fine. He's a coach who did the best he could. Monty had everyone convinced that Jaden Ivey was not a good basketball player. Like, he had everyone convinced that Jaden Ivey couldn't do these things. And 1 year, just a few games without Monty and having just Jaden be himself, and he looks like a totally different player. Like, obviously, he's evolved as a player a little bit, but he looks totally different. And that's helpful. And kind of flipping into that, no Monty, there's also no Troy Weaver, who is now the general manager doing similar things with the Washington Wizards, who coincidentally just went all of November without winning a game. So maybe it's Troy. I don't know. I know the Pistons have beaten the Wizards, and everyone was looking at Troy like, look at Jaden Ivey do well, and this is what you deprived us of. And finally, one of the new faces who's coming in, become a very big fan favorite, Malik Beasley from Minnesota, 3-point shooter, typically on the wing, catching and shooting, can get to the hoop as well. Small forward, shooting guard. He has got a little dance that he hits whenever he hits a 3, especially a big one. It's definitely catching on with a few people. It's even become mocked by an opponent when they did it against Toronto. But overall, they're a very fun team. They get out, they get the ball up and down, they play fast, they play hard. They don't really get blown out. Their last game was a blowout, but save for that, like, they've been holding teams tight. And I think this might be the year they finally push and maybe make it 7th or 8th seed towards the playoffs. I'm not saying they're going to win the whole thing, but they're making noise. And that's honestly all I want from young sports teams. I mean, obviously you want them to win, but if you're going to at least make noise and make people have to think we're playing the Pistons, we're playing the Lions, we're playing the Red Wings, we're playing the Tigers, we have to lock in. If we don't lock in, they'll beat us. That's all I want as a sports fan. Like, winning from there, if you can make people take you seriously, you can start winning games. And people are taking the Pistons seriously now.
Yeah, and with such a small roster that basketball has, you can turn around a franchise pretty quickly.
Yeah, all it takes is maybe 1 or 2 players who really want to buy in, finding the right time and the right moment, and you can grow from there. And the Pistons have the pieces. I've said it in years past. They have the pieces. It's just something is off, and we're seeing what was off was the coaching, because BJ Bickerstaff has essentially the same roster, and last year's Pistons got their 7th victory in February.
I remember that.
This year's Pistons already has 9 wins. Something was off. Something was in the water. They had to get it away from there, and everyone looks excited and happy to play. They just got to clean up a few issues, and they could maybe make a little bit of a run. I'm not saying they're going to win the championship or anything of the sort. I know they have the in-season basketball tournament. They're currently 3-0 in that, which is nice to see. Maybe they'll get some hardware or get some important games down the line. But they're playing hard and they're playing well, and that's really all you can ask from a young team.
I love it. I want to see all of our teams do well. Fletcher, Sharpe, thanks for making some time on this Monday to kick off December. We'll be at the end of the year before we know it. I cannot believe it.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's moving a little bit faster than I'd like. I know time is on a construct, but this construct feels like it's on the fast forward right now.
Well, if you want to support what we're doing at Daily Detroit, you can by becoming a member. Patreon.com/Daily Detroit. Local media requires local support to survive. Also, make sure you're signed up for our newsletter, dailydetroit.com. You can sign up for it right on the homepage. We're going to be doing more with that. Keep in touch with us that way. With that, I'm Jer Staes.
And I'm Fletcher Sharpe.
Remember that you are somebody. Take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit.